Good afternoon and welcome to Healing the Planet, Climate Action as a Religious and Moral Imperative. My name is Seth Anderson and I serve as director of the John C. Culver Public Policy Center here at Simpson College. Today's program is jointly hosted by the Culver Center and the Department of Political Science with co-sponsorship from the Department of Religion, Religious Life Community, and our student-led Sustainability Club. Please note that today's program is being recorded, but attendees and their questions will not appear on screen or be personally identifiable. Only the moderators and panelists will be captured on video and audio. Please type your questions into the Q&A box at the bottom of your Zoom screen at any point during the program. Our moderator will pose selected questions to panelists during the final segment of today's program. It's now my pleasure to introduce Assistant Professor Adrian Gathman of Simpson's Department of Political Science. Professor Gathman and I started developing the idea for this program more than a year ago during the Iowa caucus campaigns. The pandemic delayed our plans to host this program last spring, but we are pleased to come together in this virtual space today and welcome a fantastic panel of speakers to explore the growing momentum for climate change activism in communities of faith across the country and around the world. Adrian.
Thank you, Seth, and good afternoon, everyone. As a representative of the Political Science Department, it's our great pleasure to be able to co-sponsor today's programming. As Seth said, the idea for this program grew out of last year's presidential race. As caucus campaigning was underway, climate change and its effects were hot topics amongst the candidates at debates, town halls, and within their campaign messaging. One candidate, Pete Buttigieg, stepped outside of the typical discussion during its CNN town hall on climate change and likened it and its contributions to sin. Buttigieg, an Episcopalian, went on to say, if you believe that God is watching as poison is being belched into the air of creation and people are being harmed by it, countries are at risk of vanishing in low-lying areas, what do you suppose God thinks of that? In a separate interview, he also noted that to him, environmental stewardship isn't just about taking care of the planet, but also taking care of your neighbor. And climate change, he said, will inevitably hurt all neighbors if not addressed now. Buttigieg's perspective picked up significant media attention, but he was not the first to make these connections and arguments. He was just amongst the first to do so on a national stage. His narrative inspired us, Seth and I, to search out local and national organizations with similar messaging and movements for change, which brings us here today. I want to welcome and thank you all for coming and joining in this discussion. I will be turning it over to our moderator for today, John Kara Shields, an instructor of religion here at Simpson. John Kara joined us this year and has brought a wide range of expertise, having completed a Master of Arts at Cambridge University, a Master of Divinity at Yale's Divinity School, and is currently finishing a PhD at the University of Notre Dame. John Kara is currently teaching a course on religion, ethics, and the environment, providing a natural fit for this programming as moderator. I'm sure the discussion and conversation will be rich, and I want to thank John Kara for serving as the moderator for today. We'll have time for question and answer after the panel's discussion, so please send any questions you have to John Kara in the question and answer box at the bottom of the Zoom screen. John Kara.
Let me add my thanks to those of Seth and Adrian for those of you who have joined us today. And of course, thank you to our panelists for coming. Again, please do ask your questions in the Q&A. Even in the middle of the talks, you can type them in because they won't be intrusive. And that way you won't lose track of the things that you want to ask. If you have a question which is for all of the panelists, please say to all, or if you have a question for a particular panelist, if that's while they're talking, I might be able to keep track of that. But otherwise you could say to Matt or to Raihan or to Dr. Gunpreet. And that way we'll know who are you most interested in hearing respond to the question you've asked. We'll start with comments by each of the panelists. I will introduce each panelist. They will have some comments about what the work that they do. But we also really want this to be a discussion with you and to respond to the questions and concerns and interests that you have about climate change, religious and political and moral organization and ideas that are motivating people to work on these crucial problems that we're facing today. So we'll start with some comments by Matt Russell. Matt Russell is the Executive Director of Iowa Interfaith Power and Light, part of the nationwide Interfaith Power and Light movement. He's a fifth-generation Iowa farmer and has spent more than a dozen years in teaching, organizing, and advocacy work focused primarily on economic and environmental sustainability. Matt, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for hosting and inviting all of us to be here. It's a delight that I get to share this hour with my colleagues and all those listening in and asking questions. The way we do our work at Iowa Interfaith Power and Light, we're a statewide organization. We work with people of faith and conscience on environmental justice and specifically on climate action. As an interfaith organization, we kind of do our work in two moves. The first one is we invite people to go deep into their own faith. So whatever their faith tradition is, go deep into that. What is your faith tradition asking you, inviting you, challenging you in terms of environmental justice? And all of our faith traditions have those components. And then we ask you to identify what are those values and how do those values connect with the values of other faith traditions. So it's like, go deep into your own tradition. And even those who don't identify it in terms of a faith tradition, but in terms of conscience or morality, what is it that drives you personally? And then what are those values? Lift those up and connect them to the very similar values that other faith traditions share. So it's, who are you as a person of faith? And then how are you as a person of faith connected to other people of faith across the great faith traditions, here in Iowa, around the country, and around the world? We are living in an incredible time right now. What I like to say is this is one of the most incredible opportunities to be alive that humans have ever experienced. And the reason is because we're in this great transformation. We are going through it, we've been going through it for a few decades, and in the next 2 decades, the next 20 years, we're going to be going through this incredible transformation. It's similar to like the Industrial Revolution or agricultural revolutions. It's similar to that, right? We start in a place and we come out the other side in a whole new place of how we're organizing our lives and living together. But here's the difference. All the previous human transformations have typically happened in a particular place with a group of people over a fairly long period of time. And what's different is that we are going through this all together, every human being at the same time in a very short period of time. And the transformation is absolutely huge. And here's what that looks like. So the last 150 years or so, we've been living in the fossil fuel era. And there's some great things that have happened in the last 150 years. Lots of human indicators have been really great. Conflict's gone down, women have become more empowered, education has gone up, literacy rates have increased, public health has increased, life expectancy has increased. You can see my point. A lot of great things, nutrition, mobility, quality, standard of living, lots of great things have been improved through the fossil fuel era. But that's over, right? That era is over. And we now see that on almost all of these indicators, we're getting feedback loops that almost all of these areas have either flattened or are now starting to decline. So clearly the feedback loops are saying we have to do something different. And so the way I like to think about it is we're really leaving. One of the ways to think about the fossil fuel era is to think about it in a vision of scarcity. So if you have the fossil fuels, you can do things. And what we do with the fossil fuels is we force nature to do what we need it to do. If we don't increase yields, we're going to starve, right? If we don't physically move around in certain ways, we're not going to be able to live like we want to live. We're using the power of fossil fuels to force nature. And where we're headed is embracing a future that's about abundance. It's about partnering with creation. If you don't see the world in terms of creation, it's about partnering with the environment or the universe to be able to do the things we need to do. Instead of forcing against it, we're partnering with it. And the future is not a vision of scarcity. It's a vision of abundance. There is enough. All of our faith traditions tell us that and help us understand that being alive, being part of the universe is really living in an environment that provides enough, but we have to see it and we have to work together to embrace that. So some of the common values across our faith traditions are, think about home. All of our faith traditions talk about and help us understand what it means to be at home and build homes and relationships. And the environment. How are we living and caring for the environment? How are we caring for community? And there's a sense of hopefulness and equity. All of these values are really important to our faith traditions. And all of these values are absolutely critical to help us get to where we need to go to embrace a future of abundance, so that we not only are avoiding the climate crisis, like limiting the climate crisis, we're actually co-creating and participating in building a way in which humans live on this planet that is actually better than it is now. It's not just about avoiding a catastrophe. It's about embracing the possibilities of living those values at a deeper level where everyone benefits. And that's really what's at stake in the next 20 years. We are going to do that really, really well, or we're going to do it not so well, or we're going to fail to do it. And the consequences of failure are really catastrophic. So the world is a couple of programs, because I want to get to the question. So just a couple of programs and how we do our work. One of them is called Call to Climate Action. And that's where we're working with people of faith to say, hey, how are you being called to be part of the action around environmental justice that's going to get us to this hopeful future? And we really focus on students. So we have a fellowship program in the summer where we hire students to work in a team and really think deeply about what does this moment mean. They write a statement, they write opinion editorials, and they really they shape some actions in the fall to really invite students to say, hey, as a person of faith, and I'm preparing to live my life, build a career, how's environmental justice a part of that? How am I and my career going to be a part of that? Another program is working with farmers. We call it Faith, Farms, and Climate. And we really invited farmers to talk to each other. We bring them into church basements and ask them, how's God calling you as a farmer to help be part of the solution to the climate crisis? So you can kind of see we focus on a couple of things: abundance and hopefulness, and then action, and really about deep identity, because what we like to say to our supporters is, who you are is who God needs, or who the universe needs. You don't have to become somebody else in order to be part of the climate solution. Who you are is actually fundamental. And so from a political organizing policy standpoint, that's really important to build that bridge to a hopeful future, and that it's about your current identity. It's not about becoming somebody else. It's becoming deeper who you are and how we do that together. And so with that, I'll open it up for questions later and look forward to hearing from the rest of the panelists.
Thank you so much, Matt. As I'm just going to keep reminding people, keep putting your questions in the chat. I've seen some questions come in already. Thank you so much for those. We're going to move on and hear from Tori Goebel. Tori is the national organizer and spokesperson for the Young Evangelicals for Climate Action. She has a master's of environmental law and policy from Vermont Law School and was previously the communications director for Young Evangelicals for Climate Action, but also for the Evangelical Environmental Network. Her work is nationwide. She's currently based in Boston. I hear they have snow there just like we do here. Thank you so much, Tori, for joining us.
Hello, thank you so much for that kind introduction and for having me here on the panel today. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and share with you all a bit about Young Evangelicals for Climate Action and how you can get involved with our work. I'm so glad to be here today. So we'll start off with just an introduction to our work. YECA was founded in 2012 in the context of a presidential election. In the beginning, we talked about how in the most recent election, climate change was a hot topic. Everyone was talking about it, and it was a key part of discussions. In 2012, that wasn't really the case. And so YECA was founded out of the Evangelical Environmental Network as a way to bring young Christians to this issue and to bring climate change to national attention in a way it wasn't in the context of the presidential election. And as our mission states here in the bottom, at YECA, we're young Christians, And we are taking action to address the climate crisis as part of our faith. We're not doing this because we're Democrats or Republicans or environmentalists. We're doing this because our understanding of the Bible is that we are called to love God, love our neighbor, and care for his creation. And because climate change is so deeply impacting life for our neighbors, as a Christian, I feel called to respond to that. So that's just important to keep in mind when thinking about our work, as we're doing this out of our faith, not other political concerns. So there's three main pillars of our work, the ways that we approach this calling. First, we mobilize our generation of evangelicals, and that's what I'll be spending most of my time talking about today, the ways that we equip young people, especially college students like many of you watching, to take action on climate change. We also want to influence and work with our senior church leaders to talk about creation care and the climate crisis in our churches. And finally, the third pillar of our work is holding our political leaders accountable. Climate change is a great moral challenge, and it requires solutions at all levels. And so we want to work with our political leaders to ensure that we're taking bold, just action to address the climate crisis. So I'll just share a few pictures about our work to help describe some things that we've done to engage in these ways in the past. This first picture here is from the Climate March in 2017. We gathered a group of over 50 young Christians from around the country and brought them to DC to participate in the Climate March. And then after that, we went to Capitol Hill to meet with legislators and share about our faith and why we feel compelled to take care of God's creation. This other picture are some college students as part of our Climate Leadership Fellows program, which I'll talk more about at the end of my presentation. We also try to engage with our church leaders through things like days of prayer. This is an example from one of our days of prayer where we gather to pray as a way to address the climate crisis. We know that as Christians, we are called to pray and trust in God, and also called to act on that. And so we've tried to host days of prayers and events with churches towards that end. This is a picture of some students, I believe at Northwestern College in Iowa, where we had a speaking engagement. If you would like to chat more about Young Evangelicals for Climate Action, I'm so glad to be here today with Simpson, and we would love to continue having these conversations. One recent campaign at the beginning of 2020, we had an open letter to the attendees of the National Prayer Breakfast in DC, calling on them to include the victims of the climate crisis in their prayer. And then when they left the prayer breakfast, to go back to their churches and talk about creation care from the pulpit on Sunday mornings and in their churches. That letter was then published in the Religion News Service. And then we went to DC and stood outside of the prayer breakfast, not in protest, but as a way to add our prayer to theirs inside, to read our open letter and hand it out to those walking inside the building. This is an example of one of our climate leadership fellows at the time, Lincoln. He is shaking the hand of then presidential candidate Chris Christie and asking him how he plans to respond to the climate crisis. I'm not sure we got a response on record, but that's an example of our college students having the chance to engage with political leaders and bring climate crisis to the front of the conversation. Our student leaders have also had a chance to impact their campuses. At Gordon College in Massachusetts, we had a fellow who made solar panels part of their senior class gift for the graduating class. And they were able to put solar panels on one of the buildings on campus. And so something that we're really passionate about is helping to equip young people to create change, not just at a political level, but in their campus communities as well. So why do we focus on young evangelicals? Well, first, it's faithful. It is part of our faith. I'm a young Christian myself, and I feel compelled to address the climate crisis as part of that. We also know that there's a generation gap, which is why EN wanted to specifically fund a youth wing of the ministry, because studies show that young people, both on the political spectrum and within the faith, have different views than their elders. Young people are more likely to believe that stricter environmental laws are worth the cost, for example, compared to their older counterparts in the church. And even young Republicans prioritize things like clean energy more than older Republicans. So there's a generational divide politically and within the church. And what we're seeing is that more and more young people than any other generation before are really passionate about caring for God's creation and caring for the environment. We also know that young people are tomorrow's leaders and voters, and young people are unique imponent messengers for their community. A recent study has shown that children, particularly daughters, can foster climate change concern among their parents. The study found that the best people to talk to your parents about climate change is you, and you help foster that concern and desire to take action. And specifically, the study found that daughters to fathers had the highest rate of generating concern. So how do we reach young evangelicals, any evangelicals, or really any faith community or group that you're trying to reach? Well, first, we build on shared values. There's a lot of shared values with the church. You'll find them in your community, and building on those and showing that you don't have to change your values or abandon them to care about the climate crisis, but rather your values are giving you a reason to act. It's also important to recognize and affirm existing identities, not telling people that, oh, you have to abandon your faith as a Christian, you have to abandon your political identity, but rather there are ways that you can address the climate crisis no matter who you are. And communicating via trusted messengers is another great way to reach people, especially young evangelicals. At YECA, we are focused on young people and we are intentionally youth-led. We have an age limit for staff and volunteer leaders because we know that young people are the leaders of tomorrow and we want to empower them to lead as well. And finally, we root our action in hope. So some shared values at YECA and within the Christian community are the authority of Scripture. The Bible tells me that God created the world and we are called to love it. And so for Christians, the conclusion to that would be to care for God's creation as a way to love God and also our neighbors who depend on it. Values like the sanctity of life. We're seeing that the climate crisis, environmental pollution are all things that are impacting people's well-being, their livelihoods. Even just this week, a study came out that found 1 in 5 deaths were caused by fossil fuel pollution. And also we are concerned about justice, particularly for marginalized communities. And that really calls us to act on climate. And I think we'll get into that, especially during the question section of the program. And also a passion for evangelism. Dr. Catherine Hayhoe, who is an evangelical climate scientist, said everybody already has everything they need to care about climate change. Whether you're a young person, a parent, a scientist, a doctor, however you identify, whatever values you have, give you what you need to care about climate change because this is such a major issue that impacts all parts of our lives. And YECA, we want to be rooted in hope, the hope of meaningful personal practices as a way to live out our faith and love our neighbors through climate action. And also the hope of collective action. We want to offer you a community, if you're watching this and you really want to be involved, there is power and hope in collective action, and we want to invite you into that movement. And as a Christian, finding hope in God's good future for the world. And so if you are a young Christian, if you're interested in this, or you know someone, we are looking for our next cohort of climate leadership fellows. You will gain valuable skills, be a part of a community, and it even includes a stipend of $500 per semester. And so if you're interested, apply by March 15th. You can head to our website, YEC Action, to learn more. And we just would love to have you apply. So that is all I have for today, and I'm looking forward to the question portion of this program. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tori. Now we're going to turn to Rashidi, who is a clean energy organizer with the Iowa Environmental Council. A graduate of the University of California, Berkeley, with a focus on environmental economics and policy. Her current work focuses on the 100% Iowa campaign, which is a movement that unites and empowers Iowans to advocate for just, clean energy transition in Iowa. Thank you so much for being with us, Raihan.
Thank you, John Kara. It's great to be here today. I will quickly share my screen. All right, I hope all of you can see my screen right here. All right, so as mentioned, I work with the Iowa Environmental Council based in Des Moines here, and I'm focusing on our 100% Iowa campaign that I will talk a little bit about now. So it is a grassroots movement of IEC because we noticed that we needed to join in this inevitable clean energy transition and kind of providing a platform for people to advocate for clean energy issues that affect their lives and their communities. I also want to talk a little bit about IEC, which is the largest and most comprehensive environmental coalition in Iowa. And through education, advocacy, and coalition building, we raise awareness and also affect policy changes that make Iowa a better place to live, work, explore, and enjoy. All right, so I'll tell you a little bit about 100% Iowa. We are a little bit over 1 year old now, so that's pretty exciting. We began in January, the campaign began in January 2020, and pre-COVID, obviously we were outside doing field organizing, and then after everything shut down, we focused on digital organizing, which has been great to learn on how we can engage with people in different parts of the state and also the country. We really focus on growing our diverse coalition, and that we do that through education and advocacy. And the focuses on clean energy are wind, solar, electric vehicles, energy efficiency, and also other technologies such as storage, transmission, and other things that play a huge part in this clean energy transition. We also, this past year, we have gained over 5,000 supporters statewide and across all 99 counties in the state. So that's pretty exciting to know that a lot of people, want to be a part of this movement. And I believe that we also had close to 2,000 supporters that engaged with us through action alerts or event signups and more. Some of the events that we've had were the Clean Energy Mock Caucus, where we taught folks on how to caucus for the election campaign last year. And the candidates were wind, solar, electric vehicles, and energy efficiency. So that was really fun when we still had in-person events. We also host Renewable Readers, which is a virtual book club event. We also had a sustainability scavenger hunt that was, hosted through a online app. And we are currently having our Clean Power Hour, which is a virtual networking session with specific communities across the state. And also a campaign that we worked on, and I will talk a little bit more about, is 100% Des Moines, which is a campaign in the city of Des Moines. I will share a few of the photos that we have when we were having in-person events. You can see that we participated in the Climate Crisis Parade that had thousands of people from across the state to march to bring awareness to the climate crisis. And I believe there were over 70 organizations that also sponsored this event. So that was really cool to see. And at the right part of the photos, that was our Clean Energy Mock Caucus that we held. That was really fun as well. We held it at a local brewery. And we had these, you can see my supervisor had counted those 4 candidates that I mentioned, which were solar, efficiency, electric vehicles, and wind. And at the bottom left, you can see we held an environmental lobby day at the Capitol. And that was just a really fun day. I wasn't there that day, but it was just a great day to see advocates and also legislators connecting and taking action on the issues that they care about. So I mentioned the 100% Des Moines campaign. This was actually a campaign that started in August of 2020, where we formed a coalition of individual supporters, local leaders, and all types of community groups and businesses to back a 24/7 clean energy standard in the city of Des Moines. So this really gained a lot of traction, and we did a lot of outreach, shared action alerts, and also presented at groups to increase awareness on what 100% Des Moines actually means, and to also provide a platform for folks to advocate for this goal, for this clean energy goal. And also just encourage people to contact their local representatives to support this goal. Some organizations like Beyond Coal and also Iowa CCI also had info sessions and lobby days to kind of keep the momentum going and provide a platform for people to take action on this. A city council member actually championed this resolution, and groups like the Des Moines City Task Force for a Sustainable really helped organize tours and panel discussions to educate city council members on this topic and how this goal really affects different parts of the community. And also the council actually held a workshop that brings different stakeholders to educate people on this goal. And community leaders from faith groups, from youth, women, and BIPOC-led groups actually signed on, and some signed on to support this goal. And also some of them even wrote op-eds to increase awareness on this issue. And it's just really inspiring to see how, you know, a lot of people care about this goal and making sure that they also have a say in of space to provide feedback on, you know, some of the languages that we have in the letters that we send to the city council or the action alerts and stuff like that. And everyone just really played a huge role in making sure that this goal gets passed. And before you know it, you know, a few months have passed, and I think around a month ago, January 11th, that's when the Des Moines City Council voted for the city to commit to a 24/7 carbon-free electricity standard by 2035. And we had a unanimous vote, which was really great to see, and just to see like all of these different efforts come together, and you know, people just agree on how important this is to ensure energy access, and you know, energy equity will be achieved. And the huge part, the important part of this goal is the 24/7 language, which really means that by 2035, Des Moines citizens will receive electricity only from renewable energy. That means no fossil fuels by 2035 around the clock. Yeah, so that is you know, something that can really be replicated in other cities as well. You know, working towards this goal that is multifaceted, achievable, and also equitable. I will share a little bit about how digital organizing works. You know, some of the background. We shared this action alert at the top left for Des Moines residents to contact their city council representatives. We also had a panel discussion from other cities that have adopted 100% goals, so that, you know, we can learn from them and kind of get some of their insights on how to achieve this goal. And at the top right, you can see 100% Iowa. We held a webinar where you know, folks can learn about this goal and also take action. And at the bottom left, you can see that that was a few seconds before the city council passed the resolution with a unanimous vote. So that's my screen, and you can see like I was super excited, but I also wanted to get a picture of the to capture that moment. So just to remember that by. And also at the bottom right, you can see all of the different headlines that highlighted this unprecedented city level clean energy goal, and just really shows how Des Moines and Iowa is a clean energy leader, and that other cities and other states should follow suit. So yeah, that's one of the things that really kept us going, and we're looking ahead to this year, trying to identify the next, you know, cities that could adopt similar resolution through our Clean Power Hour virtual networking event. I will share a little bit more details about that a little bit after. You know, we want to be able to get to know clean energy supporters in different counties leading Iowa's transitions, so that we can identify who in these communities actually want to take action, and how, you know, we can empower them and provide them resources and tools to adopt similar goals. We also, want to keep helping supporters take action on clean energy expansion and fossil fuel retirement. You can see that there is a support Iowa solar action alert. The photo at the bottom right there. We're currently sharing action alerts for folks to contact their legislators on the state solar tax credit, and yeah, a lot of different things that will happen that we look forward to. And some of these, I mentioned Clean Power Hour at the bottom right. You can get to know, clean energy supporters in your communities. We are having more dates that will announce. So if you just go to that website, you can kind of find out if we're hosting an event in your community. And also at the that's coming in, I think 9 days, a few days. The Environmental Advocacy Day that IEC is hosting this year, it'll be virtual. And feel free to register. It is a free registration where you can meet other advocates and legislators and take action on the issues that you care about. It is virtual this time, which I think is great because other people, from any parts of the state could take part in this. So we do hope that, some of you can attend. We'd love to see different communities, different youth groups, campus groups attend so that we can meet you all and, you can learn how to participate in some of these things in advocating for the issues that you care about. So yeah, that's all I have. Feel free to contact me or join our movement at 100%iowa.com to learn more about how you can be a part of the clean energy movement in the state. So yeah, thank you, John Kara. I will stop sharing my screen. If I can figure
Thank you so
out.
much. Our last speaker on the panel here is Dr. Gunpreet Singh, who is a pediatrician and a parent who's been a member at EcoSikh for a number of years and has recently become the president of the USA chapter of EcoSikh, which is a grassroots response from the global Sikh community to the threat of climate change. So working internationally, but Dr. Singh is specifically the president of the USA chapter. Thank you so much for being with us. We look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Let me try and share my screen. So EcoSikh is a faith-based environmental organization. And we believe that we are a small part of the Sikh response to climate change. A little bit about Sikhism. So Sikhism is a monotheistic religion that was founded by Guru Nanak Dev Ji about 500 years ago. We have 10 gurus. A guru is a teacher. And our present guru is our holy book, the Guru Granth Sahib. Sikhism believes that all men and women are created equal. In Sikhism, a woman can hold all the same posts that a man can. So a woman can be a priest, she can perform all religious duties, she can perform baptization, just like a man can. So Sikhism came into existence in India when there was a lot of discrimination based on caste. So the lower caste were considered untouchables. They could not sit or eat or marry with the higher caste. So this was a basic principle that was addressed by the Sikh gurus. And so they stressed that all Sikh men should have the same last name. All women should have the same last name, Kaur, men as Singh, to signify that we are all equal. In our community meal, the langar, everybody sits together at the same level, eats the same meal, again, kind of signifying equality of all. The code of conduct for Sikh way of life is Naam Japna, Kirat Karna, Vand Chakna, which is to live a truthful life, an honest living, remember God every day, and to share a part of your earnings with the needy. A true Sikh should always be in harmony with his environment. So this is a quote by the first Guru, Pavan Guru Pani Pita Mata Dhart Mahat, which basically means that air, water, and earth are like our family. And so they deserve the same kind of love, respect, and care. Another quote from the Sikh scriptures, Balihari Kudrat Vasya, Tera Ant Najai Lakhya. This means that the creator lives within his creation. So if you want to love and worship the Creator, you need to love his creation. So as you see, our gurus had a very close and caring relationship with the environment. And that is where EcoSikh derives its inspiration from. We were founded in 2009. We have several chapters now. So climate change is an undeniable fact. The effect of global warming is all around us. I don't need to remind you of the relentless fires in the Amazon forest, California fires, the bushfires in Australia, damaging vegetation, damaging habitat of animals. Then there is these intense rains with the rising sea levels, the floods in Texas. We've recently seen with the climate change, the freezing temperatures and winter storms in Texas. Coastal cities like Mumbai are faced with threat of going underwater, people being displaced, losing their jobs. Droughts are another phase of climate change because when there's intense rainfall, the water just runs off. It does not penetrate into the soil. And so then they're followed by long dry spells and intense hardships that we see on people. So the problem is huge. And EcoSikh has been doing its share in India and US. So why India, you might ask? So the climate goal taken on by several countries is net zero carbon emission by 2050. But the wealthy developed countries have already profited a lot from the fossil fuel industry, and they still are the major carbon emitters. So unless we kind of finance and support these developing countries, this goal is impossible to achieve. And we also know that poor countries like India, with this huge population and poverty, are disproportionately affected by climate change. Air pollution in India in some months is so bad that schools have to close down. And but air pollution does not need a visa to travel across borders. Earth is one big planet. So we cannot clean our part of the planet without helping clean the more affected and needy parts. So now that I've laid the groundwork for our work, I'm going to start with our work in India first, and then talk about our work in US. I'm going to talk about our most recent work in India first, because this is what we are most involved in. So on the 550th birth anniversary of Guru Nanak Dev Ji, who is our first guru, in 2019, EcoSikh pledged to plant 1 million trees around the world. Trees, as we know, are the lungs of the earth. So in India, we are doing this as mini forests called Guru Nanak Sacred Forests. So these forests could have anywhere from 550 to several thousand trees. That basically depends on the land that is available to us. The land is basically a lot of times donated to us by a church or a gurdwara or a factory or a school. And to date, 180 such forests have been planted. So we use a unique scientific Japanese method called the Miyawaki method to plant these forests. So about 15 to 30 species of trees or plants are grown in close quarters. And how the science works is that these plants all have different requirements for space, for water, for light. And but they can be grown in a small space. So that is very important in a country like India, where there's not much land available. But again, using this scientific method, these forests grow 10 times faster. They are 30 times more dense than a natural forest. There is 90% survival rate. And they require some initial care, but then they become self-sustaining within 3 to 6 months. Each of these forests can be located on Google Maps. Our EcoSikh team goes back and supervises on the forest, but there's a contact person that can be reached at each site. And then we use native trees. So in fact, before a forest is planted, the EcoSikh team will go and conduct a research and study the native trees of that region. So by using native trees, one, it helps to improve biodiversity, and it improves the survival rate. We've done several forest training workshops where we engage youth in the art of forest making. So as you see, there is some youth volunteers here. And generally, we found that youth are very driven and passionate. And when they see meaningful change happening, something that's going to help the environment, help them in the future, it's not been hard to recruit them. So this is a picture of a forest. These are the initial few days when the land is tilled, the soil is prepared, so there is mulching that's involved, organic nutrients are put in, they put in water retainers and biomass, and then the saplings are kind of put in a specific order, and you see the youth volunteers all ready to help. And this is the forest 6 months later. Look at the change. It's lush and beautiful. Look at the size of the leaves. Look at how dense it is. The previous picture, each plant just had about 4 or 5 trees, 4 or 5 leaves. And here it abounds in leaves, and they're about 10 or 12 feet high in just a matter of 6 months. Another forest. And this is like a side-by-side comparison. I had a video, but I think in the interest of time, I'm going to skip it. Other EcoSikh projects. So organic langar. So langar is the community, is the free meal that is offered to anybody who visits a Gurdwara. And at the Golden Temple Amritsar, which is one of our main spiritual sites, 50,000 hot meals are offered every day. And so EcoSikh, along with other environmental organizations, was a main force in talking with the Sikh leaders, the political leaders, in transforming this langar into organic and green langar. So here's a picture. So, you see everybody sitting together at the same level and eating the same meal. We use steel utensils. EcoSikh has done several workshops with local farmers. So all the grain, the fruits, the vegetables that are used in this langar are grown by local farmers, organic, pesticide-free, and supplied directly to the kitchen. The meals are prepared on a big scale. There's an assembly line. That's the stack of steel plates. So we don't use styrofoam plates. We don't choke up landfills. That's how volunteers come together and help clean. Then EcoSikh first introduced the concept of Sikh Environment Day. So now that has caught on. Several Sikh institutions all over the world observed March 14th as the Sikh Environment Day. And so basically hymns are sung in the Gurdwara about nature, workshops are held about composting and recycling, there's bicycle rallies, there's cleanup efforts that are done in neighborhoods, school kids distribute plants in their neighborhood. And then we're involved in advocacy workshops, like I said. EcoSikh work here in US. So here we are involved with Project Clean Stream, an alliance for the Chesapeake Bay. So basically we do cleanup drives at least twice a year where we gather volunteers and we clean up along the banks of the river. So here in Maryland, there's a lot of tributaries of the Potomac River, which flow into the Potomac, and then that flows into the Chesapeake Bay. So last year, we cleaned up the banks of Anacostia River, which flows into the Potomac. And there's a lot of trash, industrial sewage, human sewage, trash that gets dumped into the river and along its banks. And in fact, the water in the river is so dirty that swimming is banned because there's so much E. coli that grows in the river from the sewage. But then all of this ends up into the bay. And Chesapeake Bay, if you know, is the largest estuary in US. And it supports a lot of plant and animal habitation. Blue crab, which Maryland is famous for, is found in this bay. But all this trash ending up into the bay is going to threaten this. And so that is kind of one of our main things that we work on. Sikh Environment Day, which is coming up. So we do a lot of local cleanup drives around neighborhoods. We partner with our local DMV area, Interfaith Power and Light. We've had prayer meetings and workshops trying to, again, bring about education and awareness about climate change. And then we have been instrumental in local gurdwaras here in the US in changing to organic langar and steel utensils. So a lot of gurdwaras have their own kitchen gardens, and they use steel utensils. And then, so this is kind of a flyer for when our Sikh Environment Day, the Project Clean Stream we did, trash bags that we collected. This is our team proudly displaying their EcoSikh shirts and the trash bags that they had collected. So just one more aspect of Sikhism. So, you know, seva, which is helping others, and compassion is one of our main principles. And so, in fact, a lot of local gurdwaras here in US have been doing these drives where we are preparing langar and distributing free langar and produce to needy communities in our neighborhood. So, in fact, most gurdwaras have been doing this twice a week since March. And these are just some pictures showing the, you know, langar being packed, being distributed, cars lining up. So in conclusion, like our 10th Guru Gobind Singh Ji, he inspired Sikhs to become saint warriors. He said that, you know, you have to take up and fight the cause for the weak and the vulnerable. And at this time, Earth is vulnerable because of climate change. And so it is the duty of every Sikh to kind of do their own small share in trying to help protect Earth. And that's where EcoSikh derives its inspiration from. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Singh. I didn't want to cut anyone off. I'm so thankful for all of your comments for the whole panel. Unfortunately, it hasn't given us a lot of time to discuss the questions that people have put in. So I will be combining some of the questions that people have asked, and I'll ask you to keep your answers relatively brief so we can hear from everybody. One of the questions that I've had that's sort of recurring is, you know, at one point, Matt talked about, you know, all faith traditions or many faith traditions. And we heard Raihan talk about, you know, working in a secular institution. And so some of the questions are asking, what are some of the other faith principles? Dr. Singh talked about seva as like one of the key Sikh values, this idea of like working for the justice for everyone. But what are some of the other principles or key ideas that are informing the work that you do? And how do they interact with either working in a secular institution, working in an interfaith organization, or working in a like faith particular organization? What are the sort of principles that guide that for you? And I'll open that to the whole panel.
I saw another question about, I use the word abundance a lot, and really abundance means enough. And so one of those common things across, and when I say all faith traditions, I obviously don't necessarily mean every single one, but I'm talking about historically the ones that are recognized over time and space, and really hundreds of indigenous religious traditions as well. The idea that enough means that I have enough and you have enough. If I'm doing something because you can't do it, in other words, I can eat because you can't, that's not abundance. That's selfishness. That's, you know, so abundance really isn't about extravagance. It's really about, does everybody have enough? And the science is telling us that this planet can sustain 9 or 10 billion people with enough, but it can't sustain some of us polluting way more or having personal mobility because other people can't. And so that idea of abundance and enough, that idea of sharing and the interconnectedness of all of us, I'd say that's one of those really fundamental values that you'll see across time, you know, historical faith traditions as well as contemporary faith traditions, and even the non-faith kind of humanistic values center as well.
Yeah, so kind of, I kind of feel the same, that, you know, so kind of like in Sikhism again, we preach compassion for all. And I feel that this goal of environmental justice and clean air, a just society for all cannot be achieved if we do not include everybody in our movement. And so it is important to kind of reach out and help those that are more needy, and it is important to kind of live in that harmony with our environment. And so it is kind of duty of each one of us, like, either you're a parent and you want to leave a good, healthy planet for your kids, or as a physician, you see increasing rates of infections in younger kids, or from a religious point of view, from a humanistic point of view, it is important for each one of us to do our share to kind of help with climate change and include everybody in that climate movement.
I think that brings us back to a point that you sort of introduced earlier, Dr. Singh, about how climate change doesn't recognize national borders, air pollution doesn't recognize national borders. We see representation in this panel from people working very locally. So Raihan working, in the Des Moines area, specifically very close to us, and then, Dr. Singh working in India and around the world with EcoSikh. So what are the different ways to combat despair? I think one of the key themes that Matt brought up was this idea that we can have a positive orientation towards this work. We don't have to focus on sort of moral frozenness or the sort of apocalyptic ideas of what's coming next with climate change. How do we work locally with a global mindset, or globally recognizing the way that's going to impact local folks? And maybe we can hear from Raihan and Tori, since we haven't heard from them yet in the Q&A.
I'll add briefly, I love this question because I think staying hopeful is key to keeping up with the action. And I think one thing that gives me hope in this work is the fact that there are things we can do here and now, locally, globally, that are going to address the climate crisis and help care for our neighbors on the local and global level, particularly around issues of justice. Like, we see that air pollution and climate change disproportionately impacts low income and communities of color. And I have hope that we can address that and make real changes that are going to help combat that injustice. So that's just a short answer to that really important question. But I think being rooted in hopefulness is a really important way to sustain the work, and it has to be a practice. We have to come back and remind ourselves of that, because it's really easy to be down about the work when so much bad is happening.
Yeah, and the other thing I wanted to add is, believing that everyone has a role to play, in climate action. And it's also having real conversations and understanding, like, what do people actually care about, and how do these things affect, other issues that is also, something that we have to battle, social justice issues and environmental and gender issues, gender rights and stuff like that. And I also wanted to answer a little bit part of the first question. So one of the things that motivates me really, I do this work that is very secular, and it's not a faith-based organization. But I want to share that I grew up Muslim, and I do identify with some Islamic values. And growing up, I've learned how some of these key Islamic figures are actually what's called khalifas, which are, kind of like successors or ambassadors to humanity, to humankind. And, their responsibility is to, participate in community, and also understand the coexistence between human and non-human beings, and also leaving the world a better place than they found it. So that's one of the key motivators for me. And I really believe that, all of us actually have a part to play. All of us are khalifas, are ambassadors. So that's one of the things that my work with 100% Iowa, we empower individuals and communities to take action at the local level to affect changes statewide and also nationwide and international as well. Because everyone really, the key to stay hopeful is understanding that you have a role to play, and you have to take action to be able to see these changes in your everyday life, if that makes sense.
Thank you so much, Raihan, and thank you, Tori, for those answers. I think those were both really helpful in giving us more context. Unfortunately, it's now 2:01, so I have to let everyone go. I really appreciate you. Thank you for making me a trustee of your time. And also, we will try and get the video from Dr. Singh and ask the others if there are other links they'd like us to share, and share them on our Facebook page so you can continue to investigate the fellowship options or the involvement options that they have mentioned in their talk. And I know we didn't get to everyone's questions. So if you have questions or comments that you would like to share, you're welcome to share them there. And we can see if we can get some more engagement going on that page, just to address more of the things that you had to ask and answer about. Thank you again so much for being here. I really appreciate you spending part of your Wednesday afternoon with us. And thank you again to all of our panelists.